So I'll also hand over now to Senator Watson. You may give us your contribution briefly in 2 minutes, what you think happened at the constitution making process in terms of locating the needs and the aspirations of people with disabilities. Over to you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Dariro. Greetings to all who are participating in this meeting. I want to start by saying we are not people living with disabilities. Some of us who live with our families. We are people with disabilities, period. Well, I was part of the Constitutional Commission in 1999, the referendum of which was rejected in 2000. And I also participated at the COPAC effectively as an active participant representing persons with disabilities. In both processes to amend the constitution, disabled people, persons with disabilities, came in numbers. Persons without disabilities, even in rural areas, and Mukoma Dagi, Honorable Douglas Monzora is my witness, because by that time he was chairing COPAC, and he was really supporting us, and we'll never forget him for that. But I think the mistake happened. Perhaps it's not a mistake. It was deliberately, and unfortunately, Honorable Monzora was also part, I think, of the committee which finalized the document. Many contributions, many things which are said by disabled and non-disabled were thrown away. For example, almost all provinces we traveled, they'd agreed that at least 15 seats should be set aside for persons with disabilities. But we ended up having 2 seats, not in Parliament, but at the Senate. So what it means is that we ended up having a drop of cold water on a hot stone. There is no absolute representation which can actually be said is representation. Yes, it's okay that we are 2, but it's not okay that we are only 2. We need to increase that, and we need to have some people at the lower house. Now, all of us know that we are almost through in having the finalization of the amendment of the Constitution. Ironically, there are going to be 10 seats for youth. And by the way, in terms of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, or in terms of the attitude of Zimbabwe, even in the legislators, when we say youth, it's a tacit approval that they are saying as long as they have no disability. If we say women, we say women in Zimbabwe, but inside our mind, the setting is that as long as those women have no disabilities. Because if you were inclusive enough to have people with disabilities also included when we say women, these proportional representation of Parliament will be having disabled women from each province. By so doing, we'll be having 10 extra women with disabilities in their diversity. But all the parties who are in Parliament simply do not do that. I want to go home right now, although it might be controversial. It's lucky, and I'm happy that Honorable Douglas Monzora is here as well. Even in the recallings that are taking place and the replacing, I can bet my last said that there is no person with disabilities. Is that a mistake or is that attitudinal? It's a clear discrimination. So I'm saying the Constitution itself just does not take into account the aspirations of persons with disabilities. We can say the number is what we want, the quantity. The right of an individual, the right of citizens has nothing to do with the population. That there are 1,000, 2,000, 50,000, 2 million. We don't need to go as far as that. That is an extra we can do after. But what is important is that are we really taking into account the rights of 60,000 people, if they are 60,000 or 2 million, as long as they are minority? The answer is that in Zimbabwe we are not. In other words, even legislators like Honorable Gonese. I liked his statement, although it surprised me, that look, what needs to be done is perhaps to come with a legislation which will actually fill what was left at the Constitution. I don't think it may help, because it's like you're having a shadow, you are sitting under a shadow, and the shadow is bent, it's not straight, it's not put properly. You struggle to want to correct it. You are wasting your time. What you need to do is to correct the tree, which gives birth to that shadow. So if we deal with the Constitution, I mean, if we deal with the Disabled Persons Act and the bill, is what we are saying, as long as it does not go along with the provision of the Constitution, it's just a waste of time. You know that anything, any act which does not align with the Constitution is not proper. So without wasting time, I simply say, I think we need to go back and come up with a Constitution which will say, I think it's page 45. It's about the rights of the elderly. It's clear that will do than this. But when it comes to the right of persons with disabilities, the narration just under is different. So I think what is important is that we need to be clear and come up with a better Constitution that will take into account the right of persons with disabilities. Not that will give a guess as to say, if the resources are permitting, how do we measure? There's no clear measurement as to how will those resources be said to be enough. It becomes something which is not clear to me. The Constitution gives a tacit approval for discrimination against persons with disabilities. Tacit permission, tacit approval, tacit whatever, in favor of the state. And we are saying this needs to be corrected. I think with these few words, I have to give others a chance. But the truth is that the Constitution of the Republic of Zimbabwe is not pro-disability. And, well, let me finally say, disabled themselves are the ones who are supposed to say this Constitution is not correct. Anybody else without disability who says the Constitution is correct, what is needed is this and this, I don't think that's the best way. There's what they call self-representation. Kana uchirwadziwa negumbo chigumwe chero karapiwa na doctor unofanira kubvunza, and vakangwara madokta vanobvunza kuti zvinochi zviri kuita sei, kwete kuti dokta iti zvava right, wangosara chendiwo kuzodza musunga uya ayo zvava right. That's what I appear to be gathering from the learned lawyers we have as participants here. Thank you, Tariro. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Senator, for that profound submission. And you actually touched on a number of issues that I think you spoke of the issue of attitudes that Mantate had raised, where you are saying that the exclusion of people with disabilities, is it by mistake or it's an issue of attitudes? And I like the fact that you spoke of the analogy of the shadow and the tree. That gives the proper picture of where people with disabilities are in the national agenda. That analogy is so befitting. Thank you for that. So I like the other issue that you raised, Senator Watson Khupe, where you say that political parties themselves have ignored the issue of representation with regards to people with disabilities within their own structures. So how then do we expect that to then transcend or move to the national in terms of representation in parliament, where you have only said, which is really appalling really, where you spoke of the representation being 2 seats out of 15, which are only in Senate and not in parliament. It is actually a paltry representation, which should be a cause for concern. And the main issue with regards to the constitution making process is the one where you said that many contributions were made. People were widely consulted. People with disabilities and people without disabilities made contributions, but those contributions were just thrown away. What a travesty of justice. So now I'll give this opportunity to our 7th panelist, Tsepang Nare, in 2 minutes to 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. I will dwell on 3 key and critical aspects that persons with disabilities had during the constitution making process. The first key aspect revolves around recognition and upholding of their inherent dignity, which is enshrined under Section 3 and Section 56. Section 3 goes on to say the principles of good governance are binding all states and its institutions and agencies of government, which includes persons with disabilities. So the persons with disabilities were looking forward to a constitution that emphasizes their recognition and upholding of their dignity. So that's the first key point. Second key point, persons with disabilities were looking forward to strengthened social protection mechanisms. Strengthened social protection mechanisms are there to alleviate poverty and inequality. Remember that poverty and disability are at par. So when this process was being done, they were looking forward to having certain provisions that are strengthened to look into their social protection. Number 3, persons with disabilities were looking at the issue of self-representation that I've heard my other colleagues allude to over and over again. Why self-representation? Disability is cross-cutting across all ministries where decisions are being made. Disability is bound to feature. But what did we get? We got a constitution that objectifies persons with disabilities. That's why the previous speaker, Honorable Watson, could say, I don't think it's proper to say the constitution is okay, we did all that we could without getting to hear the voice of persons with disabilities. So the constitution objectifies us, because if you look at section 83 that you've been alluding to, there was like to provide, to assist, to do this, and then you wonder and say, okay, even if the state is obliging to its mandate, but where is my voice in this provision and in this encouragement? Because at the end of the day, even if you are to provide something, because I've got a right, I need to say something. To say, I know what is provided is okay, but why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do ABCD? But in the Constitution of Zimbabwe, there is nothing of that nature, number 1. Number 2, there is deliberate actions that were done. Because if you look at a section on children, look at a section on women, look at a section on youth, they say reasonable measures. For children, it's reasonable policies that for persons with disabilities, it's within the limits of resources available. Then you wonder and say, are resources needed only for persons with disabilities? This question is tackled to those who are part of the constitution making processes, because youth need resources, children need resources, women need resources, but there is nothing of that nature. As when it comes to disability, it's within the limits of the resources. And then the constitution goes to say, we'll provide ABCD, we'll do this. There is a contradiction there, because even if it's written that the state will do ABCD, then you'll say, but how are they going to do it since there's already said within the limits of the resources provided? The issue of equal participation is not mentioned in the Constitution. But if you go to women's issues, there is participation of women in political, economic, and social issues. Go to youth, the same is there. but for persons with disabilities is to provide them. So there was a piecemeal approach, and when the Constitution was being done, I'm sorry to say, the charity model was being used. Yes, we appreciate that the state was obliging to its mandate of assisting its citizens, but in assistance, I have to have a voice. With that said, thank you.
Thank you, Tsepang, for your very, I would say it was a very comprehensive submission, one that has also enlightened me with a few issues that you have raised. The first one is the issue of self-representation. You have mentioned it. It's something that also Senator Watson Khupe also spoke about, that the issue of disability is cross-cutting and it should not be viewed as one homogeneous group, and that it seems as though the Constitution actually objectifies people with disabilities. The other issue that you also raised was that the issue of the provisions for people with disabilities within the Constitution, it has the qualification that says if resources are permitting. Yet you have mentioned that the issue of resources is cross-cutting. It also touches on women. It also touches on children. But why should people with disabilities be confined with a qualitative statement that speaks of whether resources are permitting for them to realize or enjoy their rights? The other issue that you also raised that is of interest is that there was a piecemeal approach to the constitution making process with regards to the interests of people with disabilities. You also spoke that the model that was adopted, I'm hoping Senator Monzora can hear this. I'm also hoping Senator Watson Khupe can hear this, as people who were part of the process. Tsepang is also speaking of the issue of the adoption of a charity model with regards to the constitution making process, specifically with the interests of people with disabilities. So this is now really interesting, and thank you for that, Tsepang. It was quite enlightening. You also spoke of the issue of there's a need for strengthened social protection mechanisms to alleviate two issues: poverty and inequality that affects people with disabilities, which you are saying at the present moment is absent. So without wasting much time, we'll go into the second segment of our meeting today. The second question that I would want our panelists to